Hello, and welcome to Peace and Podcast. I am your host, Aaron Gorley, and this is the podcast where you get to listen to Of Peace and Precipitation, a young adult novel, episode by episode, chapter by chapter, and then listen to a little bit of commentary about the writing of it, inspirations, little Easter eggs, or anything else I feel like talking about, because this is my podcast and you are captive. No, I'm just kidding. No, if you're not into that kind of thing at all, you can listen to the chapter and then flick to the next episode. Alright, or you can listen to said commentary and hopefully it's interesting to you. Alright, so this week's episode is our character Jenny, or Jen as she's mostly referred to in the book, where she now is we're back to church and now she has to meet the new youth minister. So she's forced to go to this meeting by her mom where she has to meet the new youth minister, which she is not at all excited about. And has actually kind of been pretty much down about it for a while. So she gets to meet them and see how it goes. Maybe it will be better than she thinks, but probably it will be worse than she thinks. But we will see. So without further ado, we will go into Chapter 7. Chapter 7. The first youth meeting was something Jen had been dreading for weeks. Lena, however, was ecstatic. Although it was supposed to be just an introduction, Lena had been reminding Jen every day. Reverend Adam Jenkins was going to be introduced to the church on Sunday, but apparently Reverend Jenkins had requested a special Saturday meet and greet so he could meet the few middle and high school students in the congregation. Jen searched through her closet for an outfit that would be stylish but not too stylish since it was church. On the other hand, she could never dress too casually because it was church, and Lena never let Jen leave the house in anything that wasn't church appropriate, a category which Lena defined much differently than Jen did. Jen's own style leaned much more casually than her mom. Lena loved sequins and lace and even managed to get them on sweatshirts, sweaters, and polos. T-shirts are for bedtime, Lena would often say. Jen considered herself a t-shirt and jeans type girl. Apparel clashes abounded. Give me a comfy tee and a slightly loose-fitting pair of jeans and I'll be happy, Jen would tell her best friend Morgan. Despite pretty facial features and a medium build that was thin but curvy, Jen believed herself to be plain. She felt that her boring straight hair and eyes that her friend Jessica and her endearingly referred to as poop-colored, Morgan often told Jen that with a little confidence she would be one of the prettiest girls in school. Jen often thought Morgan was full of it. Morgan did make Jen feel more confident, at least when Jen wasn't comparing herself to her. Morgan was so fashionable and had model-like perfection to her features despite being a little short. Jen, comparatively, was taller, had slightly broader shoulders, and lacked the fashion sense of a Neubauer, but was nonetheless prettier than she realized. Jen wanted Morgan to come and meet the youth minister with her, but she knew that after all the venting and complaining that she did about church, especially the couple young people's outings that she had gone to, Jen knew there was no way Morgan would go. Lena and Jen pulled into the mostly paved parking lot of the church at 5:45. Jen looked at her watch and rolled her eyes, seeing that they were 15 minutes early even to this. Jen knew that she would have to wait in the fellowship hall with her mom, who was annoyingly overexcited. Lena confirmed her obvious excitement in the parking lot by admitting with a big smile and a voice that squeaked to keep with restraint, "I'm so excited." "I'm glad you're excited." "I am," Lena said, oblivious to her daughter's lack of enthusiasm. "I need to use the restroom. I'll meet you down there," Jen said, glad she thought of an excuse just to be alone for a minute. "Okay, but hurry up, Jenny. You don't want to miss anything." She did need to use the restroom, but even more so, she needed a minute to gain the mental emotional stability necessary to withstand the next 30 minutes. Jen stood by the gaudy brass mirror surrounded by mauve wallpaper of roses. She stared, wondering why her church needed a young people's minister to bore students more individually and more frequently. At least with Sunday morning church service, it was only an hour a week, and then Jen had do her time and then remain somewhat anonymous and be done for the week. To be in a small group with those couple weird and irritatingly boring kids was more than she could handle, especially when some church prison guard armed with judgmentalness was monitoring her every move. Jen knew that her time alone was quickly running out and that she had to face the music sooner than later. As she turned the corner to exit, she saw in the thin glass that ran beside the bathroom door Reverend Shepherd talking to a young Asian-looking man. The man was thinly muscular and medium in height and build. He had spiky hair and wore a youthful rugby-style short-sleeved polo, white with aqua stripes, and jeans light in color with a slight rip in the left knee and a necklace that looked like it was made out of shells. He could pass for Hawaiian, but Jen was not sure. Jen froze to listen in on them, not wanting to go out there and have to talk to Reverend Shepherd or the young man. Is that what you're wearing? Reverend Shepherd asked in a lowered voice that seethed disappointment. The young man looked a little embarrassed or annoyed. Jen couldn't really quite tell. Yeah, I didn't think this would be that formal, he said, rocking back on his heels. No, I'm sorry, it's my fault. It's fine, Reverend Shepherd said, shaking his head. Well, my computer is this way. I'm not sure if I have a virus or what, but I haven't been able to check my email for a week. Yeah, let's take a look, the man responded positively. As the two began walking up the maroon carpeted ramp toward Reverend Shepherd's office, Jen sighed audibly. It's just like Reverend Shepherd to give the computer tech support guy a lecture on dress code before he lets him fix his computer. Not everyone wears long-sleeve white dress shirts every day of the year, Reverend Shepherd. Jen walked down to the fellowship gathering room. She took a seat next to her mom, happy that her little brother was at a friend's house. Jen glanced around to see if the other young people were there. Brian Browning, his mom, and his cousin Emma and her mom. Jen cringed in annoyance. Brian's cousin Emma had been to 2 other church gatherings, and Jen could barely stand her. Jen hunched over and put her face in her hands and stared at the floor in boredom as her mom exchanged pleasantries with Mrs. Browning. A few seconds later, as Jen was still staring at the floor, Jen caught sight of a pair of white with blue striped Pumas and light-washed jeans come into the room next to black loafers and black dress pants. As her eyes panned up and saw the young Asian computer tech support guy next to Reverend Shepherd, Jen wished they could just fix the stupid computer so they could get this torturous meeting over with. Ahem. Reverend Shepherd cleared his throat loudly. Welcome and thank you for coming. Without further ado, I would like to introduce the new youth minister of First Congregational Community Church, Mr. Adam Jenkins. It had been a while since Jen had actually heard an audible gasps, but she heard several the moment Reverend Shepherd announced the new youth minister. She and Brian were the only ones not to give a gasp at the surprise announcement. Brian glanced up for a partial moment and then went back to staring at the floor as he had done before. Jen thought probably went back to thinking about his World of Warcraft game he was obsessed with. Jen made no gasp, but her eyes were very wide and her mouth was slightly open. She felt like Reverend Shepherd was telling a joke, yet she knew he did not have humor. She just kept staring in wonderment and surprise. She, of course, had no problem with Asian people or younger, cool-looking people. She was just shocked that the church was okay with that. Her church wasn't necessarily racist or prejudiced, but it was so racially and culturally monochromatic that it was almost shocking that they had hired someone different. The other part that was somewhat shocking was this thin Asian guy was pretty chic and cool-looking, which Jen felt so odd for her First Congregational Community Church. Almost all the people that went there had the most traditional and vanilla way of dressing, that it seemed so out of place to see someone that looked like they could play on Hawaii 5-0 to be part of their church staff. Even if the church had decided to hire an Asian youth minister, Jen expected him to be a Reverend Shepherd clone, complete with black dress pants, white shirt, loafers, and signature puffy hair combed to the side. Well, it's nice to meet all you, like Reverend Shepard said, I'm Adam Jenkins. I'm from Michigan. I was a youth minister at another church in Michigan. But I came here to this church after talking to Reverend Shepard and feeling like God was drawing us here to this community. It's a little bit different than the church I've been used to, but I'm excited for what God has in store for us at First Congregational Community Church. Does anyone have any questions for Reverend Adam? The silence filled the room as the 6 people in attendance tried to think of any questions. Judging by her mom's intense expression, it was obvious to Jen that Lena wanted to ask something but couldn't quite think of anything. After an uncomfortable minute, Reverend Shepard began. I know there were a few people who couldn't make it to the meeting today. We will introduce Reverend Jenkins again on Sunday morning. Well, if there are no questions, wait, what is God good? The room stared in puzzlement as they attempted to understand what Lena was trying to say. I mean, what is good God give you? I mean, what is something good God has blessed you with? Okay, Reverend Adam answered with a smile. Yeah, well, one of my biggest blessings in my life that I haven't mentioned yet is my wife, Lindsay. She wasn't able to make it tonight, but she is the most incredible blessing I've ever had. She brings me joy every day, and yeah, we drive each other crazy sometimes, but I wouldn't have it any other way. Another wonderful blessing is my family growing up. I was adopted by my family in Michigan. I am actually Korean. I never met my real parents, but the Jenkins family raised me and took care of me and loved me as their own since I was very young. I am forever thankful to God and to them for that. Well, if there are any other questions, or I would love to hear about you guys or tell me something about yourselves. I feel like I'm rambling. Yes, hi. This is Mrs. Mary Browning, Brian's mom. I would like to know when you plan on having youth events, and I was wondering specifically if you would be able to have a formal homecoming or prom dance for students. The entire room, including her son Brian, Reverend Adam, Reverend Shepard, stared at Mrs. Browning with an identical look that could best be described as, "Are you serious?" Only Lena stared wide-eyed because she thought it was a good idea. Reverend Shepard actually began to laugh until he realized she was being serious. He restrained his laugh into a somewhat straight face as best as he could once he figured out that she did not mean her question in jest. Yeah, I hadn't thought of it, but I think that given this year and homecoming season so close and all, I think we'd have to skip this year, but could always discuss that for future years. We do plan on having youth meetings every Wednesday, just for an hour or so, like from 7 to 8. Mrs. Browning nodded in understanding, clearly disappointed, but replied, "That is true. To prepare a proper formal, it would take months of planning and preparation." Jen almost let out an audible sigh of relief about a church formal, but was not happy to hear about weekly meetings. Reverend Adam raised his eyebrows and looked right at Jen and smiled, seeming relieved as well. Jen returned his smile until she caught herself. She did not want her mom or Reverend Shepard to see her smiling. Well, I'm excited to get to know you guys, and we will see you guys soon in our weekly services, Reverend Adam said with a smile. As Jen and Lena rose from their worn, padded metal chairs, Lena took Jen by the arm to be the first in line to Reverend Shepard as they grabbed generic cookies and overly sweet punch that were put out as refreshments. "Hi, Reverend Adam," Lena said, glowing. Reverend Adam smiled back, seemingly not weirded out by Lena's huge smile and focused gaze. "Hi, what's your name?" "Lena Morris. This is Jenny. She's so special." Jen couldn't help but roll her eyes and slightly shake her head. Reverend Adam gave a slight chuckle and said, "Hi, Lena, and hello, Jenny, and you do, of course, seem very special." This time, Jen offered a gracious smile in return. "Jenny, what school do you go to?" Hemlock Ridge." "Oh, okay. I'm still getting to know the area, but Hemlock Ridge is the local school, right? Just right down the street?" "Yeah." "Okay, cool, Jenny. I'm glad to meet you and excited to get to know you in the upcoming youth meetings." Jen half smiled as she was not excited about the upcoming youth meetings and answered with a half-hearted, Oh, okay. Bye, Reverend Adam, Lena said enthusiastically as they walked away. Bye, Lena, Reverend Adam said in matched enthusiasm, then turned to the next parent. I like him, Jenny, Lena said to Jen as they walked to the car. I know you do, Mom. He's such a handsome Chinese guy. Mom, he's not Chinese, he's Korean. Isn't Korea the same as China? No, Mom, it's not. They don't even speak the same language. That'd be like me calling you Mexican because America is by Mexico. We don't live by Mexico. We live in Ohio. Yes, Mom, but part of the United States is by Mexico. Never mind. But yes, he's Korean, not Chinese. Well, whatever he is handsome. Mom, you're so weird. What? He is. Mom. That is chapter 7. So nothing like your mom commenting about how handsome young men are to kind of weird you out and everything. But moms are like that sometimes. No, at least Lena is anyways. I don't think everybody's mom's like that. But yeah, so that is a chapter 7. And again, we kind of get a glimpse a little bit about what, things might be like at church. Maybe it's not going to be quite as bad as Jen. Lena's always been excited about it, but Jen thinks it's going to be. So we'll have to see how that goes. Maybe it is. Maybe it's still terrible, but we'll see. She seems to mildly like Reverend Adam. It's funny about that. I kind of wrote this one. I like this one part about my book. Let me tell you how much I like my book. No, I'm just kidding. No, but the one part that I wrote specifically, she said that she seemed like she smiled with something that Reverend Adam said, but didn't want her mom or other people to see. Like, I remember being a teenager and there was times where my parents made me do something that I didn't want to do, but then I ended up enjoying it more than I thought I would, but I didn't want to let on to that, right? I didn't want to give them the satisfaction of letting them know that they were right, that, I actually enjoyed something they made me do or something, stuff like that. I remember being a little bit petty like that, but I don't want them to know that I'm actually enjoying it, or I don't hate it as much as I thought I did after complaining, and I feel like that's such a classic teenager thing to be well, I don't want to let my parents know that I like something they told me I would, kind of thing. So, maybe there's a glimmer of hope that it won't be quite so terrible. But yeah, when I wrote this whole chapter, I have a couple of friends that I met over the years that, were adopted by, American families, but maybe they were from somewhere else. I had a friend in college that was adopted by a Korean family, and she never met her real parents and everything like that. So it's kind of a little bit inspiration for that. And yeah, and one of my favorite lines of writing was, and I think about this as well, is that I wrote something about how the church was so racially and culturally monochromatic. Monochromatic's a big word that obviously means one color. So yeah, I've definitely been in churches that were very monochromatic. Everyone was definitely from the same area. I've actually been to a couple different churches, mostly white churches that were all white, but it definitely can be a little bit different going to church that's different. I remember one time I went to a wedding in college with one of my friends from Philadelphia, and his dad was the pastor of a large black church in Philadelphia, and I remember walking in there. It was for a wedding or whatever of one of the church leaders who are getting married, and my friend's oh, you need to make sure you just bring nice clothes to a wedding. So for me that means a khakis a collared shirt and a tie, but he meant black tie, but he didn't say that. He just said dress nice. So to me that was nice. That's what I would wear to a wedding. But everyone at the wedding was totally blacked out, dressed beautifully to the nines, and I, with my very light colored, I had a light green shirt on, a light green collared shirt on, and khaki pants, light colored khaki pants, and a tie, but my very bright skin, and I felt so out of place. I was oh my gosh, and I was just looking around and be wow, this is what people feel like sometimes when they walk into a church, and it's all everyone the same, culture and race. Wow, this is a little bit awkward for me. I never really had that awkwardness. I'm always used to, I'm very, very at home, and I'm happiest with lots of people from different cultures and, races and stuff like that. But I remember that moment, I was like, wow, this is kind of what like some of my black friends come when they go to like a church that's all white. Like, wow, it is a little bit awkward, But everyone was like so nice to me. They were so, there wasn't even slightly, it wasn't weird at all because they were so kind and like, nice to me, even though it was very much underdressed for the wedding. But yeah, so in this case, her church is very racially and culturally monochromatic, so it was very odd to have someone that was a little bit different. When in reality, those are the best things in life to me, when I meet people from different cultures and different backgrounds and look a little different from each other. Those are my favorite places to be at, for sure. So, but yeah, so this church was all about, this chapter of the church, but this chapter is all about like church and stuff, and about this new youth pastoring, and that's something that I have done vocationally remember when I was first out of college, I was a youth pastor at a church, and that kind of just involved me being kind of like a pastor in church, but I was focused on like hanging out with the teenagers, which I was so much better than the older people that are boring, right? No, I'm just kidding. They were nice older people too, but I very much enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun, being a full-time youth pastor. And the things I still love to this day, I still love, spending time with kids. I still love like teaching about the Bible and like, be able to, just show the students and try to be as kind to them and to encourage them, because life is hard for everyone, especially when you're young. It's so hard. I think when you're really young, with teenagers and middle schoolers, as adults, we've been, most of us have been through some tough seasons, and we're able to get to the other side. But when you're a teenager, it's like you get through this tough season, and you've never really seen yourself get through some tough seasons. Or maybe you have. I mean, there's obviously tough people, but a lot of, they just experience a lot less life. So sometimes when they experience something tough, it's like really, really tragic to them. And sometimes, obviously, stuff is really tragic. I'm not trying to undermine any obviously terrible things happen to everyone, including teenagers, but sometimes teenagers make a little bit more out of some of the things because they seem like they're like hopeless, all their circumstances. And obviously adults still feel like that as well, but most adults have been through some different seasons, but like, wow, life seems hopeless, but maybe it will get better because I've seen my life get better during different seasons. Maybe it'll get better again. But when teenagers happen, it's like, oh, I've never seen my life. I've never, been able to overcome such circumstances, so it seems hopeless, So I always enjoy being there in the lives of students to just show them, like, no, there is hope still. There is hope. God still loves you and has plans for your life. Wonderful plans. So that is it. This was chapter 7. And chapter 8, we are going to finally get to trying out for the school play, which we talked about. I said like 2 chapters ago, I'd be like, oh yeah, next chapter is going to be school tryout. Yeah, I was totally wrong. So, but for real, she's going to try out for the school play. And yep, so hopefully she's going to be trying out with Morgan. They had been planning this for a while, so we'll have to see how that goes. And I hope that you are enjoying this and enjoying this little podcast and the book. And the book does kind of keep better and better. I hope that if you've been listening, I hope that you see, I hope that you've been enjoying the book a little bit more as time goes on. And I would argue that it keeps getting better still, all the way to the end of it. So hang in there and keep enjoying it. And thank you. I deeply appreciate you guys listening. And enjoy. We will see you next time.